Ideal mesmo para o mundo atual seria fazer o ensino médio junto com o curso técnico, certo? É no Senac que o aluno tem autonomia de verdade, formação cidadã, foco na diversidade, preparação para o Enem, material didático sem taxas e muito mais. Na real, tem tudo que você precisa para se sentir preparado para a vida. Seja para entrar no mundo do trabalho ou te ajudar a decidir o que fazer na faculdade. Quer saber? Senac. Vem comigo. Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino-médio-técnico. Sair da escola já com uma formação profissional no currículo? Parece bom demais pra ser verdade, né? Pois é. No ensino técnico do Senac, isso é possível. É ensino médio junto com formação técnica, que acontece durante os 3 anos. Lá, eles usam metodologia para projetos, desenvolvendo competências como resolução de problemas, pensamento crítico e colaboração, além de valores éticos e sustentáveis. Quer saber? Senac. Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino médio e saiba mais.
Hi there, I am Sarah Jane Case, and I'm the host of your new favorite show, Enneagram and Coffee. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the beautiful and hard parts of being human. We discuss the Enneagram, a personality map that is taking over the world, for increased self-compassion, personal growth, and healthier relationships. Listen to Enneagram and Coffee on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Unbeknownst to Tamlin in the Spring Court, Feyre Archeron lives peacefully in the manor as Tamlin's woman, with vengeance on her mind. A wolf in sheep's clothing, the High Lady of the Night Court uses her powers and cunning to hide her true allegiance and her rage at the events in Hybern behind pretty paintings, pretty dresses, and pretty smiles. But will Feyre be able to keep her disguise in check when Hybern's commanders come to court in search of a way to tear down the wall separating the human and fairy lands?
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, death, and depression will recur throughout the podcast. Listener discretion is advised. Special shout out to our January Trophy Wives. Thank you, Danica, Carissa, Sylvie, Sierra, Colleen, Haley, Alexis, Sam, and Allison. We love you.
Love ya. It's season 3. Let's face it, folks, we're this far into the ACOTAR series, so we're going to include some spoilers from Silver Flames because they're just unavoidable. Anything ACOTAR related is fair game this season.
However, we will continue to keep any spoilers or references to other SJM works in the breadcrumbs as much as possible. We are human, though, so we may slip up, and we apologize now for all of them.
If you haven't listened to season 1 or 2, we highly recommend you go back and listen to them. However, if you're short on time or don't listen to things on 2 speed like Amy, we do have season recap episodes you can listen to in order to prepare for the analysis we have in store this season.
If you don't know who we are, we're Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast that conducts a critical literary analysis of your favorite novels. This season, we're wrapping up Sarah J. Maas's original Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy by focusing on A Court of Wings and Ruin.
I'm Jac, and I'm back with the feminist lens. Through the feminist lens, I will discuss hetero gender norms and stereotypes which in no way reflect my personal view on gender, and will only be a tool I use to discuss aspects of this novel.
I'm Amy, and I'll continue to provide analysis through a Marxist lens, where I'll view different power dynamics amongst characters and the world itself. Before we dive into the episode, we'll give you a little background on who we are.
Like I said, I'm Jac. I'm an avid reader and writer. I enjoy reading everything from classic literature to modern fantasy, good fan fiction, and I'm currently endeavoring to grow my thorough catalog of smut. I did my bachelor's in creative writing and received a master's in comparative literature, which taught me how to critically read and dissect literature.
I'm Amy, a lover of all things related to writing. I've had a love of literary analysis since it was ingrained in me during high school. I met Jac when we attended the same creative writing bachelor's program, after which I received my master's in education. You can go back to our post-season 2 content to preview the first chapter of my forthcoming novel, Light of the Forebearers.
Themes you're going to see in this book will include the monster within, as well as death and rebirth. For this first episode of Season 3, we are discussing the prologue through Chapter 3 in A Court of Wings and Ruin.
The question we're asking ourselves as we focus on this section of Wings and Ruin is the jump from Mist and Fury to Wings and Ruin believable?
The theme we're going to see this episode is anger clouding judgment.
Well, let's get started.
Oh my God, we're here.
Oh my gosh.
It just really hit me.
Yeah. I'm still in make-believe where it hasn't started.
This is practice. It's fine. No one will hear this.
Okay. If I had to boil down the prologue of Wings and Ruin to one word, it would be death. Is anybody surprised?
No.
Okay.
Because we all read the book, but
no.
But you nailed it.
Thanks. I wondered if I would. In some ways, this isn't unique at all. Mist and Fury opened with a prologue where Feyre relived killing the fairies under the mountain and ultimately tried to kill herself. So what makes this any different?
I interpret this entire first section as a big ol' premonition. This is screaming with foreshadowing and how Rhysand will give every last drop of himself in the end. But I will say, this book can be boiled down to death as well, beyond the standard meaning of dying. Many interpretations of death here.
And we're going to explore all of them.
All of them. Every single one.
We get a glimpse of who Rhys was prior to his being High Lord in the prologue, prior to the wall being formed, prior to Feyre's life in Prythian. This is the furthest back we've ever gone in the narrative up until this point. And just like in the present, Rhys is surrounded by a lot of death.
And like later on in the book, while Rhys is surrounded by death, there's a different type of scream. Right now it's the screaming of people. Later on it's going to be the screaming of him and Feyre. But we'll get to that. I'm just excited.
Oh my gosh. Sarah J. Maas paints a very clear picture of what Rhys is encountering, and it's not pretty. Quote, "The buzzing flies and screaming survivors had long since replaced the beating war drums. The killing field was now a tangled sprawl of corpses. Flies already crawled along, eyes gazing unblinkingly upward. They didn't differentiate between mortal and immortal flesh. The smoke of the keep's forges now blended with the pyres already being kindled behind me as I kept walking, scanning the faces of the dead." What a harrowing first visual.
Right?
It's awful.
Yeah. It's like Sarah J. Maas was like, remember the last book where everyone had some good, warm, fuzzy feelings with Feyre and Rhysand? Not now, bitch.
No. Well, and also, remember how Rhys has had trauma? Let me just layer more trauma on top of this.
Right? And this is the more socially acceptable trauma. You know what I mean? He comes from a warrior group.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. Same.
Now, the visual does remind me of the failure of the inner circle at the end of Mist and Fury. There was a lot of violence and loss there, too. So I have a question. As readers, at this point in the novel, we're uncertain of what is to come. But there's no doubt that there's going to be at least some sort of battle. Does this prologue build a sense of dread in us for those unknown battles?
First question of the season. Love it.
First question.
Love it. Like I said earlier, this whole prologue is one big foreshadowing, and I'm going to be repeating that over and over, so just prepare yourself. It's foreshadowing what type of book this is. It's letting the reader know that you're reading a book about war. Feyre and Rhysand, they're already together, right? We've shipped them, they're happy. And just like with A Court of Thorns and Roses, the first thing we saw was Feyre trying to survive. Then we have Mist and Fury, Feyre is dealing with depression. Now, Sarah J. Maas is people. The story isn't just about Feyre now, we're dealing with war and everything that comes with it. I also think this prologue does a lot of other work. In this book, Rhys has to train Feyre to be a leader. And this is a reminder to us that Rhys is 500 years old. He is old. Even amongst the Fae, he's not young.
Yeah, he is old.
I just feel like we don't appreciate that enough.
Yeah.
He was there in the last war. He remembers and is old and seasoned. That's why when he has to explain things to Feyre later on, it might not come off so condescending to the reader like it did in Mist and Fury, I would say.
Okay, I see that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because before Mist and Fury, we're like, geez, Rhys, shut up.
Right. Stop being so patronizing.
Right? And now it's like, all right, you've earned it. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, you've seen some shit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I will also say that SJM is setting up the foundation of Rhys's self-sacrificing nature in this scene. And that plays a huge role in the novel altogether.
Oh, yeah. His self-sacrificing nature really comes through.
Yeah.
And really, his really shines in this one. His whole need to die.
Yeah.
Really shines through. Match made in heaven.
Yeah, really.
Right?
Though.
Both of them, oh, fine. I'll be the one to die this time. Additionally, I see a lot of Feyre post her first big battle. So later on in this book, when Feyre sees her first battle, she's in a lot of shock. I think that's kind of how I view Rhys in this section too. It's the idea that mortal and fey flesh deteriorate the same way. And the fact that Rhys has to force himself not to drag his wings, just like later on, Feyre has to learn not to drag her wings. Also, Rhys reminisces here that he had to fight like a mortal, how he had to use his swords and his fists, and to me, links the two of them early on.
Yeah, because this is the first time we've had a book start without Feyre's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting and deliberate choice on Sarah J. Maas's part.
Which we talk about why we think that happened.
Yeah, a little bit later.
A little bit later. I should stick around.
You're assuming we lost them already?
Yeah.
Oh,
Definitely.
There is a line in all of this that sticks out to me and that made me pause. Quote, "We'd learned the hard way very early on that they, the loyalists, had no regard for the ancient rules and rites of battle." Now, I didn't think much about this line during my first few read-throughs, but now that I've had a chance to analyze Wings and Ruin, this feels like it's suggesting something, and I'm curious what you think. By acknowledging how Hybern and its allies played dirty in the war 500 years ago, is Sarah J. Maas, in this prologue, setting up the reader to accept the ways Feyre and Rhys and company played dirty in the present or throughout the rest of the novel?
I think that's a great point, and I think it's more directed towards Feyre fighting dirty at the Spring Court. Sarah J. Maas is trying to shove a moral compass at us before we go full rah-rah, yay, Feyre.
Do you mean like a true moral compass or a twisted moral compass?
I think when we see Feyre in the Spring Court, she's like way off kiltered, right? And it's so easy for us to just be like, yeah, that's my girl.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I mean, yeah, like Tamlin sucks. Like, go ahead, burn it all to the ground. But I think when you have Rhys, a character that we love, and he's the true moral compass that we see, like, wow, he's worried about honor. He's worried about, you know, what's the right thing to do, even amongst all these dead bodies. It's a way of like reminding the reader of like, hey guys, Feyre's not all there right now.
Which is so interesting because I definitely am on the side of, yeah, you go, girl.
Oh, 100.
Get your vengeance.
I agree, but at the same time, her actions have consequences.
Her actions do have consequences, and we're going to talk a lot about that, too.
Oh, yeah. A court of consequences.
That's a great name.
Oh, it is. Maybe that'll be my next book. I have too many ideas. I need to stop thinking of them. Like I was saying earlier, I see a lot of Feyre in this section, particularly with the quote, "We were to be stomped out like vermin." In Mist and Fury, Feyre compares to the people of Velaris as vermin when Hybern attacked. Another quote here, "I always thought death would be some sort of peaceful homecoming, a sweet, sad lullaby to usher me to whatever waited afterward." This reminds me of how Feyre is constantly thinking she's going to die in book 1, but also of Feyre after her first real battle again, where she watches it happen and understands that death does not look the way you think it's going to look. Just a shout out to all the moments when SJM mentions flies, the noise, the imagery, like it's just such a very vivid thing. Like if you just say flies buzzing, every single human is just cringing.
Yeah, hate it.
Plus, you're going to get some like instant gratification in a moment later on in this episode when I mention the flies again.
Okay. Keep an eye out or an ear out.
Buzz. That was really annoying.
That was so annoying.
I'm sorry.
And then we come to realize what Rhys is searching for. His friends. Cassian specifically. Could Cassian be among the dead on the battlefield? Quote, "I picked my way through the corpses to another Illyrian, then another and another, mile after mile, a kingdom of the rotting dead, and still I looked." When I think back on this prologue, I wonder if this scene helps us understand Rhys's mentality as we enter Wings and Ruin. If so, why did SJM choose to place it here at the start?
I kept asking myself the exact same thing. I'm going to say again, like I keep saying, that this reminds me of Feyre, very much so, which is very grounding to a reader who have been with her for the past 2 books. It settles us before diving and meeting a very flawed Feyre, a type of flawed that we've never seen before with her, and we might not feel connected to her without this warning at the beginning. I think that the link from Thorns and Roses to Mist and Fury, people always debated whether like that Feyre was a believable link because you go from like happy ending to now I'm depressed. But like we talked at the beginning of season 2, like that was a realistic link. I think that who Feyre was at the end of Mist and Fury and who she is now, it's believable, but I dare say an even greater jump than at the end of Mist and Fury.
That's an interesting point, only because as we're about to see a very angry Feyre.
Mm-hmm.
And her anger was certainly our anger at the end of Mist and Fury, at what's happening to the inner circle, at what's happening to Feyre, and why she's had to make this sacrifice to go to the Spring Court. So to say it's a bigger leap than between books 1 and 2, I don't think people realize that.
Yeah.
Because we were angry. So yeah, Feyre, go do your dirty deeds.
Yeah.
Get rid of Tamlin, whatever it takes. But I think you are right. I think that the Feyre we've seen grow has become this very warped thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we really have to dissect that. If we go back to my question, I think the reason why Rhys's perspective is put in here is because this is the man that Feyre is trying to protect. In the Feyre we see in the Spring Court, she's fighting for the Rhys that suffered 500 years ago. She's fighting for the Rhys who's suffered 50 years under Amarantha. And as we're going to see her throughout this novel, she fights because she does not want Rhys to have to fight anymore.
You know, it's interesting, though, because I would even say that I agree with all of that, but she's fighting for a man she doesn't even know yet. Because even though they were shacked up for a couple months together, she doesn't know him, like, with the war and everything. Like,
no.
War Rhys is totally different.
Right. But it's because Feyre is very good at making assumptions about people.
So good. So good.
It's pure talent.
That girl and her talents.
And on that note of death, loss, and pain, we enter into A Court of Wings and Ruin. Part 1 is titled Princess of Carrion. Now, if you don't know what this is a reference to, it's a reference to the Book of Breathings and one of the titles that it gave Feyre back in Mist and Fury. What I love about the different parts we're going to see is it refers to titles that Feyre has been given by other people and her evolution through those titles. So if you don't know what carrion means, it's not a carry-on bag. It's a dead body.
Did I say it was a carry-on bag, or is that
no?
Just, okay, I'm
no.
like, it sounds like something I would have said. Truly, not being funny.
You asked if it was a place.
Oh yeah, that's fair. But I do like carry-on bag, and now that's going to have the meaning.
Princess of carry-on bags.
That really is us, though. I refuse to check in. This episode's been sponsored by Away Luggage.
No airline.
No airline. I'm trying to get in with Away Luggage. I wanted them to send us some stuff.
Fair.
I mean, I'll take a discount code.
We begin chapter 1 back in Feyre's point of view. And before we begin, I must say that this episode is going to feel a lot like a repeat of the end of season 2. However, it's important that we start this season by reminding ourselves of where Feyre has been and is coming from as we meet her in the Spring Court. And so we begin this chapter with a lie. Quote, "The painting was a lie, a bright, pretty lie, bursting with pale pink blooms and fat beams of sunshine. If I'd painted the way my gut had urged me, it would have been flesh-shredding thorns, flowers that choked off the sunlight for any plant smaller than them, and rolling hills stained red." Let's think about this and how it relates to the start of Thorns and Roses as well as Mist and Fury. In book 1 of the series, Feyre is alone in the woods. It's winter, she's starving and hunting to feed her family. She's not true to her desires because she's barely surviving.
In book 2, Feyre is alone after a nightmare. She is safe in the Spring Court, but haunted by memories of Under the Mountain. Everyone ignores her suffering, and she cannot be honest about how she feels.
Now in book 3, Feyre's alone in the Spring Court Manor. Painting and healthy and safe, all the things she may have once wanted. But she's not where she wants to be, and is putting on a show in order to take out her revenge. At the start of each of the first 2 books, Feyre is unable to be true to or honest with herself. She suffers because she feels powerless in the face of her circumstances. Now, however, Feyre has made a choice to be alone, and for once, she has the upper hand.
It's also a reminder that every start that Feyre and Tamlin ever had together starts with a lie. That's always been their foundation, and here we are, her saying that the painting was a lie.
Such a great point.
And if no one knows what we're talking about, this is such a, go back to season 1 moment.
Yeah. Let's do a quick recap. Book 1, Tamlin lies about a curse and the treaty.
My favorite part is, I'm jumping way far ahead into book 1, but when the first time they have sex, it's on a lie.
Yep.
I think it's how you feeling? Fine. Or,
Yep.
yeah, no, she didn't say fine, but it was like,
It's fine.
I saw, not quite seen.
Yeah. At the start of book 2, Feyre and Tamlin don't acknowledge how each other are suffering in the aftermath of Amarantha.
Their whole relationship is based off of let's ignore everything and be physical.
Yep.
But now you don't have any of the physical stuff here, so you just have the lies left.
Yep.
Poetic.
Let's also think about this in the context of Feyre's development as a character since the start of the series, and how Feyre at the start of Wings and Ruin has become a trained spy who emulates the Grand Master of Liars, Rhys. Quote, "But each brushstroke on the wide canvas was calculated, each dab and swirl of blending colors meant to portray not just idyllic spring, but a sunny disposition as well. I had crafted my demeanor as intricately as one of these paintings." Feyre of the earlier books was not capable of this type of manipulation. She could hardly flirt in book 1 and could not feign any sort of happiness at the start of book 2. It is through her relationship with Rhys in the inner circle that she has learned the importance of deceit and the associated skills. Quote, "I made a good show of appearing lost in my work, hunching my shoulders a bit, angling my head, and made an even better show of slowly looking over my shoulder, as if the struggle to part myself from the painting was a true effort."
I love that description. It's so vivid. / every single time I always like act it out.
Do you?
Yeah, I do this.
That was great to
Was
watch.
it great? Oh.
It was that last little like side eye trying to still look at the painting as your chin is moving.
I think I got a kink in my neck for that.
Oh no.
No. But it's just a great description. You don't try to act it out?
No.
Okay. Me too.
Just as her gut urges her to paint a horrific scene, so too does Feyre think, quote, "I would have been adorned with flesh-shredding talons and hands that choked the life out of those now in my company. I would have left the gilded halls stained red." As a human, Feyre cried when she killed her first rabbit.
It's such a like fun moment to go back to. It's like, all right, slow your roll there.
Yeah, pump the brakes.
Yeah. But let's pump the brakes here.
Yeah. In Thorns and Roses, Feyre would have killed herself after she killed the 3 fairies under the mountain if the third had not been Tamlin. And then in Mist and Fury, it took Feyre a very, very long time to overcome the guilt she felt for the deaths she caused. But as we've discussed the past 2 seasons, Feyre becomes increasingly comfortable with violence the more love she feels for an individual. And as High Lady of the Night Court, Feyre's love for Rhys, Valaris, and her people has brought her to a point where she is ready to paint the halls red.
It's like a play on the words of like paint the town red.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I was thinking paint the roses red from Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Yeah, it just kind of made me think of like paint the halls red. It just makes me think of like paint the town red because she's having a great time.
Which she is.
Yeah. Oh, she is. She's here for a good time, not a long time. Here for a destructive time.
Yeah.
As I was saying in the prologue, there's a lot of links between Feyre and Rhys. Here in chapter 1, I'm going to shift a little bit and say that there is a whole lot of connection between Feyre and Tamlin. And I'm just going to keep calling this out and point out all the ways that they're very similar here. And like I said, this is where the lines start to blur between the two. Feyre calls the court incessant, unrelenting spring. If spring is unrelenting, then, like, what are you, Feyre? Like, she is determined to get revenge, and she's not thinking about things all the way. Feyre says the painting of the spring court should have been flesh-shredding thorns, but then she goes on to say, quote, "I would have been adorned with flesh-shredding talons." So, like, what is the difference between thorns and talons? Like, you're literally just saying that this place is man-eating, like, shreds the flesh and is bad. And you just said the same thing about yourself. Tamlin has thorns, Feyre has talons.
I'm glad you brought up the fact that Tamlin has thorns and Feyre has talons, because I think what's happening here is a play on an eye for an eye. Tamlin caused harm with his thorns, so Feyre has to retaliate with her talons. Harm has been done to her and hers, so she will do harm back. That's how I see it.
There's nothing more harmful than talon toes.
That is the true harm Sarah J. Maas has done on all of us.
On all of us. People tag us all the time.
I know.
On, like, talon toe content.
Yes, all the time.
And I love it. Please keep doing that.
At the thought of the things that happened in Highburn at the end of Mist and Fury, Feyre snaps her paintbrush, quote, "damaged beyond repair." I have 2 thoughts on this. In some ways, this show of strength is reminiscent of the start of Mist and Fury. Feyre, as a new Fae, did not know her own strength and broke a lot of things in the manor. She ignored or failed to acknowledge the extent of her powers back then. Similarly, as a new High Lady, I wonder if Feyre does not understand the extent of her new rage as a result of what's happened to her family and her friends from the Night Court. At the least, it's not fully tamed or controlled, and it's something she's going to have to learn to control, or acknowledge, or, you know what, suffer the consequences, which she will.
Oh, yes, she will. This also reminds me at the start of Mist and Fury when Tamlin gets Feyre a painting set with paints and brushes. Feyre didn't get to use those paints and brushes, but this is almost symbolic to me. Tamlin is putting a set of brushes back into her hand, and now Feyre has to play nice.
That's a good point.
He's like, finally, I did it.
I succeeded.
You're finally painting. In this moment, when Feyre burns the paintbrushes, her power is used for the sake of truth. Feyre says she was painting a lie, and she thinks of her own truth. Quote, the markings of my true heart, my true title, High Lady of the Night Court. Half a thought had the broken paintbrushes going up in flames. It's like she's burning away the lies, and she's so determined to keep truth at her core that it's almost impossible for her to not burn the lies away.
I didn't think of it that way, and I like your point. My interpretation of the scene goes back to what the paintbrush represents in terms of who Feyre is, rather than lies and truth. I do wonder, does the paintbrush represent who Feyre was before, and has her anger, or like the fire, somehow made the change irreversible?
Okay, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what Sarah J. Maas was doing other than breaking a paintbrush.
But then I'm also thinking, what is the one element that Feyre used all the time in Mist and Fury?
Fire.
No.
Ice.
No.
Wind.
Water.
Water. Yeah.
She made water wolves.
I had to go through the entire elements.
I mean,
no, you're right.
But she used a lot of water. So it's just kind of, to me, the fact that she switched to fire, it's doing some Autumn Court premonition as well, too.
Yeah.
Because she never really burned anything before. I specifically asked time and again for her to make fire wolves, and she never listened to me.
It's true. Feyre only uses fire when she can't control her emotions.
I'm trying to think of the times that she used fire in Mist and Fury is when she had her hands on the table and left imprints.
Yep.
And then melted her ring off.
Yep.
Other than that, fire is not an affinity for her. She always leaned more towards water.
Water and ice. Yep.
So it's almost, I will say, the fact that she's leaning towards fire right now is showing me that she's stepped away from her moral compass again. Because Tarquin is who she gets the water from. And that's her moral compass.
Yeah.
And fire
is Baron.
Yep.
Who's an asshole.
Who's not a moral compass of any sorts.
Nope. Great point.
Ooh, on the spot.
Nice. I also want to acknowledge Feyre's focus on roses in this scene and suggest that the roses are representative of Tamlin. No duh, but just have to put that out there.
Sometimes we have to say it, Yeah, there might be someone who's like, oh, right, yes.
Yeah.
Thought they were daisies.
I forgot. Feyre starts out by painting pretty roses at the height of spring in ways that convey happiness and healing. This is akin to not only how Feyre acts around Tamlin, but the state of their quote-unquote relationship. But very quickly, Feyre calls the scent of the roses suffocating and claims she'll burn down the manor, starting with those roses. But who is it that she wants to suffer? Tamlin. Feyre finds Tamlin suffocating and is doing everything to get her revenge on what he caused to happen in Hybern by his relentless drive to reclaim her.
Just like how I pointed out that Tamlin has flesh-cutting thorns and Feyre has flesh-cutting talons, as I keep saying, there's a lot of Feyre and Tamlin overlap. They're kind of one and the same here. So when I wrote my notes to this quote originally, I asked myself if Feyre is feeling not just anger at Tamlin, but her own unresolved love and issues with him. That old identity that she wants to burn away. Right?
Especially after she's just mated with Rhysand.
Yeah.
Any remnant of anything for Tamlin, of course she would want to burn away.
You don't want to hang out with your ex.
No.
Even, especially an ex that screwed you over.
Yep. Nope.
That's the last thing you want.
What I love about Tamlin being represented by a rose is that it's weak. Though it might have thorns, roses can't fight back, and Tamlin has no idea what's coming for him.
And Feyre views Tamlin as weak. On the flip side, Feyre sees herself as a huntress again. Quote, I lowered the invisible dark snares I had erected around this room to alert me of any visitor. She's calling them her dark snares, like she knows what she's doing is like she's dancing with evil and stuff. And although like I gotta say like putting out feelers is the least evil thing that Feyre's doing.
I always interpreted Feyre's use of dark to equate to night. Her power is now become like Rhys's, that is night and star-flecked and dark.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. If it was good night, she would say star-flecked. But since it's like Court of Nightmares,
it's dark.
It's dark. I mean, she's in her reputation phase right now.
She is.
Can't harp on her for that.
You know, one thing that really bugs me in this chapter is Feyre's use of her powers in this first scene. And I really wonder when I think back on Mist and Fury, is her use of this range of powers believable?
I love that you asked this because when we were prepping it, I had to like kind of think more on that of like, is it believable? Yes and no. One, she's a hell of a lot more ambitious than she was in Mist and Fury. Mist and Fury, she's like, I have butterflies and water wolves. Ooh. But I will say why I think it's believable. Because she's not succeeding. Because we find out that when the twins come in, we find out later that she's like not actually able to hold them all back the way that she thought. So Feyre's an unreliable narrator. And we're getting Feyre's view. So in Feyre's view, she's over here like, I'm kicking ass. I'm taking names. I am this creepy Talon person who's going to come in and shred all of you guys apart. But in actuality, like she's actually spreading herself way too thin and isn't holding up the plates like she thinks she is.
You're on fire.
Thank you.
I agree, because when you think back on Mist and Fury, the Battle of Valaris is her greatest show of strength up until that point. There is very little she's able to maintain all together, all at once, consistently.
Not even herself.
Right.
Roasted.
So she's maintaining a glamour on her tattoo. She's maintaining these snares around the room. She's doing all these things. It's just a lot of plates that are going to tumble really quickly.
In my mind, like, Feyre's imagining herself with all these plates spinning around. She's like, look at me go. But in actuality, they're just kind of falling apart. And she doesn't realize it, that, like, you know, they're actually being held up by someone else behind her or something like that. Like, I don't know. It just, like, I feel bad because, like, she definitely thinks that she's a badass right now. In actuality, it's like, oh, no.
Okay, so I have a total tangent. This reminds me of the Chinese acrobats in Beijing because they have a certain segment where they spin plates.
Yeah.
And sometimes when the acrobats walk off the stage, they lower the sticks the plates are on too quickly. And you see that the plates are attached by spring to the sticks.
What? It's a lie?
It's a lie.
Oh my God, is there nothing left good in this world? Wow, that's Feyre. Her plates are on...
attached to strings, attached to the sticks.
And she thinks that she's just like spinning them on her own.
Yep.
Which, like, she's doing a great job, sweetie. Like, you're doing wonderful.
But you still have training wheels.
Yeah. We haven't even gotten to the discussion. I don't think we're going to cover it in this episode. Probably, I know, in a future episode of like, can Lucien actually see the glamour because of his eye? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, excellent question.
Have you not thought that?
I haven't thought about that.
Oh, I think about that all the time. The second that he was like, my eye is special because I can see through glamour. And I'm just like, well, then what the fuck were we doing then?
Yeah.
What?
Interesting.
Yeah. Like, then, like, couldn't he see her arm?
Yeah, no wonder why he's suspicious of her all the time.
Yeah. Just saying.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, to, like, you know, and here's Lucien seeing through every single one of them. I also want to just point out a fun little writing device that SJM does here when Feyre is reminding herself of her sisters and her senses start to become overwhelmed because she just is imagining their pain over and over again. SJM is alluding to the proverbial principle of hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. We have, I heard Elaine, I saw Nesta, I scented them. So, I mean, not exactly hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, but like you can tell what she's doing here. Which I thought was just like, good job.
Good point.
I love a little...
play on Proverbs?
Yeah. It's my favorite.
To your point, Jack, we've been alluding a lot to Feyre's anger here. And I think it's important that we don't just sweep under the rug how much of Feyre's anger we're seeing that SJM is conveying to us. Feyre intentionally relives the damage done to each of her sisters and to her friends, and is mad at both Tamlin and Ianthe for their actions that led to those events in Hybern. Feyre is also mad at Ianthe for touching men however she pleases, like Rhys and Lucien. Feyre's mad that they, whoever they are, also believe her lies about how Rhys assaulted her. Quote, I added the insult to the long, long list of things to repay them for. And I'm sorry, but you can't have your cake and eat it too right now.
Right. I think it's just one of those, like, it's a clue that Sarah J. Maas is giving us, that Feyre is using faulty logic here right now. Feyre is not the relatively clear-headed narrator that we normally see. She is consumed with revenge and contradictions. Like, I'm not saying that Feyre's been reliable. Like, we keep saying she's an unreliable narrator, but, like, just how dare you even think negatively at all about Rhys doing that, but then also flat out alludes to that, too.
Right, to use it to cover for herself.
Yeah.
Like, you should be happy they believed your lie.
You don't get to be pissy about it.
Yeah.
No.
I think it's also important that we're being reminded not only of what happened at the end of Mist and Fury, but SJM is setting up the foundation of rage Feyre feels that will fuel all her actions in this first part of the novel. Feyre essentially has become the definition of wrath and rage.
Wrath and rage. Season 1 throwback.
Episode 1. Season 1, episode 1. Which Feyre used to describe Tamlin during those opening chapters of Thorns and Roses. And, ironically, Feyre will also use to describe herself.
I love that. I love it. It is such a clear went back to the first chapter of the first book moment that Sarah thought of and was like, I'm bringing this in.
Yeah, full circle.
Oh, love her. Such a good writer.
Chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss. We didn't do enough of those last season.
We did not.
We're bringing it back. Chef's kiss. We didn't even coordinate that.
But we did it.
We did it. I want to take a beat to look into the Lucien and Feyre dynamic. Right off the bat, when we are introduced to Lucien, we can tell that Feyre and Lucien's relationship has shifted. Quote, so my eyes crinkled as I gave a subdued yet happy smile to Tamlin. And then there's like a whole line break to Lucien, period. And then line break. Like it was a very dramatic line break.
It was very dramatic.
And even when Feyre thinks of her hatred for Ianthe, she still lists Lucien as one of Ianthe's targets. Feyre cares about Lucien, and Feyre's interactions with him at the start of the book are so different than what they once were compared to book 1 or 2.
Yep. And we're going to talk a lot about that this episode and in future episodes.
Oh my God. I think episode 2, 3 is when it's going to get good on the Lucien content.
Mm-hmm.
It's good now.
Let's remind our listeners of the scene. Tamlin and Lucien have walked in. Feyre has been painting. Tamlin tries to compliment Feyre, and I almost pity him when he tells Feyre that her painting looks beautiful. He's come a long way since telling Feyre that her hair was clean in Thorns and Roses, but it does suck. He can't see that the painting is soulless, and then follows up with the lame comment that he thinks we're all a mess when Feyre describes the painting as still a mess.
It's so cringy. Like, we're all a mess. He's not wrong, but it hurts so much.
It's not something you say.
We're all in this together. I think that's a High School Musical.
We're all in this together.
I still think we're both off.
No, I know I'm right.
No, we know. I don't think the beat is right.
No, I know I'm right.
I don't think you are.
Okay.
I don't think we are. But I will say you did not comment on my clean hair this morning or earlier when you walked in.
I was thinking how nice you looked
for
a recording day.
I used the new hair dryer.
Nice.
Tamlin would have complimented me on my clean hair. I want to point out that this painting, although soulless, Feyre calls her best work. This is a level of confidence we've never had from Feyre before. For Feyre to look at her painting and say it's good is not something that she has done before. But once again, she is painting where she first felt safe, at the manor. That was the first place that she got to paint freely. And it was also where she had her first collection of art, was at the Spring Court. I'm just saying that a muse can be someone that you don't love.
It's amazing and feels very Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. Your anger can still be your muse.
It is. And I bet if you were to look at it, it wasn't soulless. It was probably like seething with rage. You know? That's like some of her best stuff was there.
Yeah, it's poetic.
It is.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
One thing that has changed for Feyre is her bedroom since returning to the Spring Court, and that's because her old bedroom was now a tomb. This is not only another reference to death, which we see a lot, as we've discussed, but I think it also symbolizes the death of Feyre's life at the Spring Court, her relationship with Tamlin, and maybe even the last of human Feyre.
The symbolism that Sarah J. Maas does here is really beautiful. Keep in mind before I read this next quote that when Feyre looks into the old bedroom, she's looking into the old relationship. Quote, "But there was nothing in that old bedroom. I looked into it once. No one, it seemed, had been allowed to clean. That bedroom was a tomb." It's looking into a past relationship and realizing how much of it has died. And it's just like chilling. Whenever I read that, It's like, Feyre, you're not talking about the bedroom. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Chills.
It's really great. It's great writing. Feyre and Lucien have an interaction before they go see Ianthe, and I find this interaction amusing. When Lucien tries to get a rise out of Feyre about Ianthe selling Feyre's sisters to Hybern, and when Feyre doesn't stoop to Lucien's taunts, Lucien, quote, halted Feyre with a hand around her elbow. "You're smarter than that." This is the exact opposite of what Lucien said to Feyre when she left the Spring Court the first time because she had to return to the human lands because Tamlin forced her to, because neither he nor Lucien were bothered to give her clues about the curse. So what's changed? My instinct was totally to rant about this, but then I paused, took a deep breath, and asked myself, what would Gabriel think?
Oh.
Maybe Lucien has learned to see Feyre as a kindred spirit. Maybe even someone in which he sees a bit of himself. And if he's smart, so too must Feyre be.
If you don't know who Gabriel is, we interviewed Gabriel, who voices Lucien in the graphic audio production, and he changed our mind on Lucien.
Yeah, so we're going to be singing a very different Lucien tune this season.
It's true. So now you're going to hear us say WWGT. What would Gabriel think? Lucien is thinking like a fae, and Elaine is his mate, meaning that Feyre is basically family to him. Not only is Feyre a link to Elaine, but Feyre was a friend to him of some sort, whom he's always had to do right by, whether he wanted to or not. But Feyre was also a friend to him in some way or another. And I'm imagining that this is Lucien looking at it and thinking that he has to do right by his sister-in-law. Like he has to be there for her. Lucien doesn't have anyone that he considers to be family left. Even Tamlin is his High Lord, not his brother. Feyre and Elaine are the closest thing to family that Lucien has. Basically, Lucien sees Feyre as a sister. Then in turn, Feyre starts to see Lucien as a brother, even if she doesn't recognize that yet. And then I also just love the fact that Feyre calls Lucien out on being like, you don't even love her. You don't know her. It's a physical thing. It's chemicals.
Which is true.
Love that she did that.
I love that point that maybe even on a subconscious level, Feyre and Lucien are treating each other like siblings.
I think they are. It's like totally different dynamic between the two. And I think it is a sibling thing. I think that for me, I almost feel like it's more conscious for Lucien.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think he now straight up views her like, this is my family,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sister of my mate. And on that like guttural Fae instinct level, Feyre sees that too, whether or not she wants to admit it.
Which is going to explain a lot of the behavior that I'm like, what the fuck? We've never seen this before.
Yeah, there's so much of this. I'm like, oh, suddenly you guys are besties then, whatever.
Yeah, which we'll talk about in a
Yep.
little bit. When Feyre sees Ianthe in the flesh, one of the first things we learn is how Feyre wants to inflict harm upon Ianthe, even so far as to, quote, open up her throat, her being Ianthe. The threat of ripping out throats is used a lot in this entire series, and it never fails to remind me of how Tamlin ultimately killed Amarantha. Is it meant to be a reminder of Amarantha, or is it just because the act is brutal and beast-like that it's used?
It's a reminder of my original link that Feyre and Tamlin are one and the same, that they're very, very similar. I want to talk about this observation that Feyre makes. Quote, Ianthe still wore that pale hood and silver circlet set with its limpid blue stone. Like a siphon, the jewel in its center reminded me of Azriel and Cassian's siphons. And I wondered if, like the Illyrian warriors, the jewel somehow helped shape an unwieldy gift of magic into something more refined, deadlier. I had never seen Ianthe summon any great power than ignite a ball of Feylight in a room. Okay, so I go back and forth on this. I want to analyze this more, but I also feel like this is very much SJM saying like, nope, there is no connection. And by Feyre saying that there is no connection, we're supposed to just like take her word on it. But I also think that it might be a connection like beyond a breadcrumb that we're going to get later. Maybe this is the connection that we're going to see in Silver Flames, that there is a power that you have to call on these siphons, and there is a link between Gwen and Azriel. And before we get into the whole like Gwenriel versus Elriel, I'm like, what's the other version? Yeah, Elriel, Gwen and Az, and Elaine and Az. I just want to make it known. I'm viewing this very much as like a reader who's trying to call it.
Trying to call out SJM for her little breadcrumbs that we don't understand yet.
Completely. Like, this is like watching a Taylor Swift music video, you know? Like, there's no wrong answers because they're all wrong.
Yeah.
So this doesn't come from like a, haha, this is a Gwen and Azriel thing. This is more of a like, I think that this is a connection between the two because Feyre's making the connection. Therefore, we should make the connection later.
I have a different view of this, and I have it in the breadcrumbs. So stay tuned for that.
Yes. I will go back and forth because even later I might be like, I reserve the right to be like, this is a clue that it's Azriel and Elaine.
Okay.
It's anything that, this is a Taylor Swift music video. That's all we're doing here, people.
Just trying to call out Easter eggs.
Yep.
Feyre demonstrates her mastery over her anger and her inner beast again during the scene with Ianthe. Quote, the sound of Elaine's name on Ianthe's lips sent a snarl rumbling up my throat, but I leashed it, falling into that mask of pained quiet, the newest in my arsenal. I want to note leashed, like an animal.
An animal that has talons and wants to rip out Ianthe's throat, which is a total setup for when Feyre faces her beasts later on in this book.
Yeah. The problem with Feyre's anger is that it takes all her focus, and it makes her become an unreliable narrator in Tamlin and Ianthe's presence. Feyre makes assumptions because she dislikes the decisions Tamlin made in response to retrieving Feyre. Though I'm not saying Tamlin did the right thing. As Feyre watches the interaction between Tamlin, Lucien, and Ianthe, Feyre wrongly assumes that Tamlin, quote, still trusted Ianthe, still thought that Ianthe had merely made a bad call. We, as readers, believe the same, and this is going to get Feyre in trouble later.
Everything here in these early chapters and how she views Tamlin is going to bite her in the ass later. I love an unreliable narrator, but like, we too are fooled with all of this.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a point where we don't think Feyre can do wrong.
Yeah.
But she's doing so much wrong.
But it's like, she's doing so much wrong, but also like, shouldn't it be right?
Yeah.
They all screwed her over.
Right.
So it should be right.
Right.
But it's wrong.
It is wrong.
Stop trying to make me a better person, Sarah. Let me
have my vengeance.
Have the shitty vengeance and eat my cake too.
I want to focus again on Lucien. Feyre watches Lucien's interaction with Ianthe, but there are no thoughts or feelings about this interaction. Unlike when Tamlin speaks, Feyre doesn't make as many assumptions about Lucien in this scene. Why do I think this is important? The further we go in this part of Wings and Ruin, the more I'm going to question how Feyre and Lucien become so chummy when we've never seen it before, not really, which goes back to Jac's point about them potentially acting like siblings. In this moment, though, I think what's happening here is that Feyre is seeing Lucien express the feelings she personally has about Ianthe. Lucien's act of questioning and pressing Ianthe brings Lucien closer to Feyre's good graces. Though he might not be there yet, it's as early as this first chapter that Sarah J. Maas is doing the work to make Lucien's allegiance with Feyre and her ultimate decision to take him to Velaris more believable.
I have nothing to discuss. That was a good job.
Feyre. Jac has a note that says, discuss.
Yeah, but once I heard you, I'm like, you got it, goddess.
Oh, thanks. Lucien and Feyre continue to appear aligned when it comes to Ianthe, even in Chapter 2. When Ianthe claims she doesn't want to disturb the Hybern commanders who have just arrived at the Spring Court until after they're settled, quote, one look at Lucien told me that he and I for once agreed. Ianthe may be the only thing Feyre will admit to being allied with Lucien on, and that is because Lucien, like Rhys, was assaulted by Ianthe. Feyre, therefore, is able and willing to acknowledge the common ground she and Lucien have because he reminds her of Rhys where it concerns the priestess. We learn early in the chapter that Feyre and Rhys have not been in communication during Feyre's time as spy at the Spring Court because of her fear of being found out. Feyre weeps in the bathroom after her only communication with Rhys when she first returned to the Spring Court after Hybern. And when she thinks of the possibility that she may never hear his voice again, Feyre shuts down those thoughts instantly. Quote, I would hear those things again. I promised myself over and over. Already, Sarah J. Maas is planting the seeds of how devastated Feyre will be to lose Rhys at the end of the novel. And this is Chapter 2, Chef's Kiss.
Chef's Kiss. The descriptions in this section are just so beautiful. Like with this one, quote, I took in the cloudless blue sky beyond the open window, listened to the birds singing to one another, and wanted to roar. The idea of birds flying together like she and Rhys should be doing in the open sky, but she's locked within, it's a great image. Now, I want to ask questions because I don't think that this is a mistake on SJM's part, but this is something that I hear other people talk about. It's things I thought about, so I'm going to put it out there. Feyre says that she communicated with Rhys just once when she got to the Spring Court, right after she arrived. Feyre says, I didn't remember the bond between us being so hard to hear, even when I dwelled on this estate and he'd use it to see if I was still breathing. How would Feyre know if they weren't communicating through the bond and he was the one listening? So there's that part that I'm not sure of. But then it's also clear right off the bat that they're struggling to communicate through the bond. But later on, we find out that it's because of the twins blocking the bond. But they haven't met the twins yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I have two thoughts on this. Let's talk about the difficulty of communication first.
Mm-hmm.
Rhys could only get glimpses of what Feyre was experiencing down the bond when she shouted it down the bond.
Oh, okay. True.
I do think distance has an element of influence here. And we also have to remember that their bond does get worse after the introduction of the twins.
That's fair.
Regarding the inconsistency of, I don't remember the bond between us being so hard, I think this is a clue Sarah J. Maas has planted to help us remember that Feyre is an unreliable narrator. Mm-hmm. Feyre is rewriting her memories of the time before she accepted Rhys as this person in her life. Because Feyre treasures the bond now, it's therefore always been easy. Instead of acknowledging that there was a time that she didn't want the bond.
True. I like that. Thank you.
I want to take a moment to point out that Feyre uses images and memories of her friends and family in pain to drive her. Instead of her anger being a result of those memories, it sometimes comes across as Feyre wanting a reminder in order to intensify or justify her rage. We see this when the Hybern commanders, Dagden and Branna, arrive. Feyre, quote, was again thinking of how pained that face had been the last time I'd seen it, thinking of Rhys, covered in Azriel's and Cassian's blood, as the two Hybern commanders winnowed into the gravel of the front drive. Do you think Feyre's using these memories as fuel for her anger, or is there something else? Could it be preventing her from feeling fear at the task ahead of her?
I think she's finding her strength. It's a reminder of why Feyre is doing this, but also a reminder of who trained her. Rhys isn't the only one that Feyre uses to help focus and center her.
Okay. I do like that. I do also want to acknowledge that Feyre does feel fear for a moment here when Dagden and Branna arrive and she sees them for the first time. Quote, "But it was the two commanders that had a sliver of true fear sliding into my heart. It was their vacant, unfeeling faces that snagged the eye, a lack of emotion honed from millennia of cruelty." I wonder if Feyre looks like that right now, to be honest. Another clue that maybe Feyre is an unreliable narrator, she observes that Tamlin doesn't move right away to greet the commanders. Quote, "Tamlin seemed to remember that these were not his allies and marched down the stairs. He'd sold out Prithian for me to get me back." Again, Feyre is like, instead of allowing herself to think anything moderately okay or neutral about Tamlin, she's like, nope, he's the bad guy. I'm going to make an assumption. Let me be angry. Let me cloud my observations.
Yeah. You know, like they make an argument later on of, look, we knew we were going to get invaded by Hybern. So like, we also wanted you back. It's pretty sound reasoning.
Yeah.
They just got absolutely owned by Amarantha. So of course they're going to assume that Hybern will do the same. I'm not saying it's right. I just that I get it. Like it's like actually strategy-wise, not the worst move they could have made.
Right. I think what it does, though, for Feyre to be so mad that Tamlin would give up his lands to Hybern control in order to get her back, I think it does speak to something that we're going to see a lot in this novel, which is Feyre not believing her worth. And so somehow she must not think herself worthy of being sought after or, like, retrieved. I don't know.
Yeah. The girl's got issues.
She's got issues. I can't pretend to understand all of them.
No. I can barely understand my own. I always love looking at indicators of who is evil and the surrounding descriptions of them. Think about like when we were doing in season 2, the analysis on the chapters of when they go into the Court of Nightmares and everything was really hypersexual. You know, even Ianthe's described that way. So it's like, if you're hypersexual, it's evil. Just, you know, fun things to look at. When it comes to the twins, we find out pretty quickly that Branna is in charge because Dagden feeds her and takes care of her at dinner. So we know that these are incest twins, which is always a great indicator of evil, and Game of Thrones has prepared us very much so for this. But I also want to note that Branna's voice is described as, quote, "Her voice was deceptively light, almost girlish. Who else had a very light voice? Amarantha." So just like the concept of being like girlish, feminine, it equals evil now.
Yeah, so female equals evil.
Female equals evil, yeah.
And Feyre's not helping that case right now.
No, you're not. She's not. She really isn't. She's making a great case for it.
Note that Feyre's dress is not pink but rose-colored in this scene because she is Tamlin's in this setting.
Feyre also says of her appearance, quote, "A harmless, lovely package, perfect for the High Lord to mount whenever he wished." The misogyny, the sexism, the presumption of how it is supposed to be is disgusting.
It's so bad.
But also, like, I'm a pretty package.
You're just perpetuating the belief that you're perfect for the Spring Court.
I just really hope that our listeners by now just know that, like, I'll thirst for anyone.
It doesn't take a lot. So accompanying the commanders is Jurian, and Jurian comments that, quote, "It's not every century that the contested possession of a female launches a war." SJM is essentially screaming that the overall trope of this book is loosely based on Helen of Troy, where Feyre's both Helen and the Trojan horse. Yeah. And I just want to point that out.
It's great. I want to read a quote that I think is pretty funny. Quote, "I kept my face impassive as I curtsied to them, to my enemy. Which one of my friends would face them on the battlefield? Literally none of them. Not a single one in this group. You have Tamlin, Lucian, Jurian, and the twins. You are going to kill the twins, and everyone else is going to be with you in the battlefield, not facing against you." Season 2 in Mist and Fury, all Feyre did was like predict the future. We got reverse psychic Feyre coming in.
I do wonder if it goes back to Feyre thinking so little of herself, because she doesn't even consider the fact that she might be the one to kill the twins.
She's throwing like her friends underneath the bus right away. Be like, I wonder which one of my friends, because I have nothing to do with this.
Yeah, kind of.
Not getting my hands dirty. I wonder which one of these paintings Amy will hang up for me. Amy's my handy woman, in case no one else knew.
I'm everybody's handy woman.
Yeah.
Notice that when Feyre walks through the foyer, she doesn't remember the fairy who died in her arms from Thorns and Roses, but instead she remembers the time Tamlin locked her in the manor and Mor rescued her in Mist and Fury. Now, both of these events were traumatizing, but to acknowledge the dying fairy would be to also acknowledge the love she felt for Tamlin that was beginning to spark at the same time. Relatedly, by remembering the moment Tamlin trapped her, Feyre is choosing to only remember the moment the relationship ended. This is a perfect juxtaposition to the way she acts in this scene, which is basically to own her role as his consort so that she can gain his trust. A masterful description I want to highlight for all of us that I really appreciated. Quote, Prince Dagden yielded to his twins every wish and order, as if he were the blade she wielded to slice through the world. So much is gleaned from these two sentences. Dagden is not subservient in a weak way, but in the way of a weapon, and Branna is just as deadly through the use of him. It paints a really accurate portrait of not only their dynamic and how we see them interact, but also how Feyre will interact with them in this part of Wings and Ruin.
It's a fancy way of her saying they fucking. That's what that is.
Okay, but also,
yes, you're right. When Feyre says that she and Lucien will escort the Highburn crew to the wall, Feyre's just waiting for Tamlin to say something. Quote, but it seems the High Lord had indeed learned his lesson, was indeed willing to try. Notice how Feyre can't call him by his name. She can't say Tamlin learned his lesson because Feyre can't reconcile that maybe Tamlin has grown, has changed, because then he would not fit into the box that she has for him. To the Tamlin supporters, none of which listen to us, I know that for sure. And if you do, then please let us know. I will point out that even though Tamlin is trying and is saying he'll keep Feyre informed, Tamlin still never keeps her completely in the know with his plans. We later find out that Tamlin was trying to find a way to get out of the deal with Highburn. Wouldn't that have been something pretty important to tell Feyre, like when she got back to the Spring Court? Be like, hey babe, sup? So you know how I kind of messed up and I partnered with Highburn? Well, guess what? I was just faking it. I'm looking a way to get out of this, like you and me together, ride or die. Like it would have been an important thing to share. It would have saved a lot of pain, and Feyre might not have gone so buck wild in his downfall.
Yeah. And she might not have made choices that would bite her in the ass later.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Still comes back down to his fault.
Yeah, of course. It's like when the person you've criticized hyper-focuses on fixing the one thing you listed as an example of something they've done wrong. And then when you get mad at them, they ask you what more do you want from them. They're not capable of seeing the bigger picture of problems.
Yeah.
I will not allude to who in my life is like that.
I just want everyone to know that Amy looked at me very aggressively.
I did not.
Just like stared at me and pointed.
So many lies. Feyre judges Tamlin again, and in doing so deems him naive. Quote, yet he thought I'd stomach it for him, for us, that Highburn wouldn't feast on the humans once that wall came down, that we'd merely absorb them into our territory. Not only has Tamlin fallen so low in Feyre's regard, she has become guilty of doing the same thing that members of the Spring Court once did to her, which is deeming her naive, misguided. Feyre also thinks, quote, I wondered if Tamlin had heard how I defended Velaris, that I had protected the rainbow against a legion of beasts like the adder, that I had slaughtered the adder brutally, cruelly, for what it had done to me and mine. So I don't know if it's obvious to you, but it's obvious to me that Feyre, without saying it explicitly, is comparing herself to Tamlin here, the High Lord who did nothing when the adder punched Feyre under the mountain. More than that, Feyre has protected people in a way that Tamlin has never been capable of, and Feyre's pride is seeping in this moment. And honestly, because of that, the comparison is a little tainted for me.
Jurian, love him, brings the awkward level up a notch by asking, quote, I always wonder who made that eye after she carved it out. We do not speak of Amarantha here. This is another marker that Feyre's making to differentiate how things are different between the Spring Court and the Night Court. Although I will say that Amarantha is not an open discussion amongst the inner circle. Later on, when Mor mentions Amarantha, we get the same record scratch moment there. But the difference is that Rhys and Feyre have talked about Amarantha openly, and no one here has done that with Feyre. When Jurian keeps trying to stir things up, says that Elaine must have been assaulted by the Illyrian army, Tamlin is the one who shuts him up with a snarl and says, "You will behave as a proper guest, Jurian, or you will sleep in the stables like the other beasts." 2 parts to this one. 1, Tamlin literally just snarled like a beast, so therefore he belongs out there too. And Feyre has a history of having sex in a barn with Isaac Hale. So, she also belongs out there with the beast. Like, basically everyone at this table is a beast. Jurian tries to give Feyre clues, though. Tries to find out her own alliances. Quote, "You know that we fought together, don't you? Me and your High Lord." Like, he's throwing things at her.
But Feyre doesn't see it that way because her mind isn't open to it. Instead, Feyre assumes the worst. And from her point of view, the two, being her and Jurian, are in a tug-of-war match, and that's demonstrated in their food. While Jurian has no problem slicing his lamb, Feyre struggles to force down her bites of dinner and thinks the food is bland. It seems like she's on the losing end of this match. But funny enough, I don't know if you noticed, Feyre doesn't actually ever see Jurian eat. He only cuts up the lamb and skewers it.
Interesting. So, what do you think that means then within the context of this scene in the story?
I wonder if it's 2 things. 1, it's showing that Feyre thinks they're in this tug of war, but Jurian's not, actually engaging.
He's like, I'm not tugging.
I'm just trying to figure out if we're on the same side.
Yeah.
And then 2, I wonder if Jurian already knows about Faebane being in their food.
Oh.
Or going to be in their food. And so he's trying to demonstrate, hey, don't eat this food.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or it could all be a coincidence.
I love that, later on in the book, it's just a whole lot of Jurian being like, people, if you had just tried to read my brain.
Yeah.
If anyone here had just tried. We know that Jurian knows that Feyre is full of BS here. I also wonder if Feyre has ever tried to look into his mind, if she would have found that truth, especially since he's human, so he should be easier to read. Although the twins might be actively guarding him, so I guess maybe Feyre could have tried and we just don't know, but the twins blocked her.
Maybe. Things we'll never know.
Never know.
Can we also acknowledge the fact that Jurian winks at Feyre? On one hand, when you think about Feyre's perspective, it comes across as mocking her. But could he, in fact, be trying to signal something? With that, be sure to keep an eye out for all the times Jurian winks in the future, because I'm going to argue he's trying to give her clues.
We don't talk enough about how hot Jurian is, and we don't get enough fan art of him. Throwing that out there. Please and thank you. Moving on to chapter 3.
Okay. It's not the comment I thought you were going to make.
No, I literally wrote Jac has a comment.
Yeah.
And it's me complaining about not getting enough fan art.
Nice.
Because I was looking up images, and I was just like, just because he doesn't have wings, people, Jurian can still get it.
I'm sure he can.
I'm trying to come up with a list in my head of which characters can't get it. It's a short list.
Yeah. King of Hybern.
No,
What?
Look, we had Patrick Dempsey as our fan cast.
Did you? You did.
I did.
Yeah. That's
And you had
Antonio Banderas.
Are you telling me either one of them can't get it?
No, I was really into Patrick Dempsey for a long time.
Exactly. So I said what I said.
Yeah, you did.
Going into chapter 3, remember in season 2, Amy made the great point that Feyre kept comparing herself to animals because she grew up in the forest with animals, because she grew up with animals in the forest. There's a kindred spirit there. I say this because as we start chapter 3, we see some projection going on here. Quote, "The spring woods fell silent as we rode between the budding trees, birds and small furred beasts having darted for cover long before we passed, not from me or Lucian, but from Jurian and the 2 Hybern compadres." I did that.
You did it again.
I don't even have it typed out that way. I still... And the 2 Hybern commanders, as if they were as awful as the bogey as the Naga. Feyre can't admit that she's truly afraid of the Hybern crew because she's trying to hold it together. So instead, it's the animals that are racing away from them specifically, not the large group on horseback riding through the forest.
Because that's not terrifying at all if you're small.
Yeah, a poor squirrel. Lucian goes by, what's up? Feyre comes by. Hey, how you doing? These other people, oh my god. No, squirrel would run. At breakfast, Feyre tries to bait Tamlin by asking him what's wrong when he's clearly tense with the idea of her leaving. Tamlin responds that it's a headache. Could this be the twins getting into his mind and messing with him, and Feyre being cocky enough, thinking that she was able to block them out, not realizing what's happening here? And again, like, the twins are older, stronger. Maybe, just maybe, Feyre have a slight bit of, I don't want to say humility, yeah, but have a slight bit of humility here.
I think it's also the first signs of the Feybane, because chapter 2 ended with Feyre having a headache, and chapter 3 is starting with Tamlin having a headache.
Look at that. Yeah, you're right.
While out investigating the wall, Dagden and Branna, quote, stomped over the fallen pink blossoms. You might think this is a useless detail, but does it not represent Hybern stomping all over the spring court?
Yes, it does. Love that.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. More to come.
Favorite iceberg. Feyre uses her appearance as a disguise, although it's one she knows the twins, Lucien and Jurian, probably all don't believe. Quote, I knew my elegant fine clothes weren't fooling the prince and princess into forgetting that a fellow Damati now walked at their backs, but I'd still carefully selected the embroidered sapphire jacket and brown pants, adorned only with the jeweled knife and belt that Lucien had once gifted me. The clothing choice is interesting. Feyre chose to wear a sapphire jacket, the same color as Ianthe and Azriel's siphons. Feyre also wears the dagger that Lucien gave her, another item that we discuss in Season 2, that was ultimately replaced by the knives that Cassian gives her. I think this outfit is both a mockery of Ianthe and Lucien, as much as it is a way for her to channel Azriel and Cassian.
By the end of Mist and Fury, Feyre had learned how clothing could be used as a weapon. She's done just that so far during her return to the Spring Court, wearing the same colored dresses she wore at the start of Mist and Fury to convey her attempts to assimilate in the way that Tamlin expects. So it's no surprise that she's using her clothing choices here as a weapon too. Since we're talking about clothing, let's also observe that Lucien's jacket is described as fawn brown, which is doe adjacent. Who's been described as a doe? Both Feyre and Elaine.
And Elaine, which is more connection, breadcrumbs, I think, maybe. Lucien and Elaine, I don't know. Just tell me, Sarah. Just like...
I just want to know.
I just want to know. We start to see Feyre using Lucien in other ways as well. Feyre lets Branna appear to intimidate her. Feyre shifts closer to Lucien. Quote, Branna studied how closely I stood to Lucien, how he shifted slightly to shield me. It's playing into this whole family protector role. Remember how I said that Lucien sees Feyre as family? This is Feyre playing into Lucien's instinct to protect what little family he has.
And honestly, it's the perfect setup for all the ways Feyre's going to fuck over Tamlin.
Oh my god, yeah. Feyre goes hard on manipulating Lucien, which I normally would feel bad about, but because Gabriel has changed me, I'm a changed woman. So now I start to feel bad for him. Quote, don't trust me? After all we've been through? Feyre is getting bold with her manipulation.
She is. And in that manipulation, the pink blossoms make a reappearance. So let's talk through them. When Lucien and Feyre communicate silently to each other to separate from the twins, they move through the forest, quote, there was nothing but ruffling pink blossoms. When Lucien and Feyre talk, and Feyre lies to Lucien, Feyre, quote, plucked up a fallen pink blossom and twirled it between her thumb and forefinger. Throughout the conversation, Feyre chucks the blossom to the soft moss between her and Lucien, who, quote, frowned at the discarded blossom, but still said nothing. If we think of the blossoms as the spring court, Feyre is toying with the spring court. She's toying with these blossoms, and she just as easily and quickly discards them once it served a purpose. And Lucien's too loyal to say anything. In some ways, Feyre is no better than Dagden and Branna.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lucien reveals that on the day that Feyre left, he beat Tamlin to the manor and found that Feyre's melted engagement ring was on the floor, signs that she was not abducted. This is going to be a trend we're going to see in this chapter and in chapters to come, discovering that the people around Tamlin were not honest with him, and the narrative that Tamlin had in his head and his actions are the fault of others as well. It's a larger contributing factor there.
Yeah, I mean, Tamlin obviously is to blame, but so are the people around Tamlin.
Tamlin is in charge of his own actions, but when everyone is around him being like, oh yeah, she was taken. She wanted to be here. Wasn't miserable at all.
Right. Yeah,
No. Question. Feyre thanks Lucien for coming to Hybern to get her. Do you think she meant it?
My instinct is to ask a question in response to your question, but let me try to answer. I think she does. I think she realizes in this moment she reflects on how much Lucien needed her because of the way Tamlin acts when he is without Feyre. And I think she recognizes that Lucien did make sacrifices and thanks him for it. I think. I don't know.
I'm going to go with a little bit of yes and a little bit of no, you know? Like, I think she's thanking him of being like, wow, you cared more than I thought you did, because, like, he's never cared about her.
Right.
But at the same time, like, you dumb.
Yeah, I agree. I go with your answer. When the group returns to the Spring Court Manor, Ianthe comes on the scene. I want to note that Ianthe has been described as an afterthought a few times already, the action all happening in the past instead of the present. Feyre as a narrator is diminishing Ianthe's importance by doing so. What we do notice through Feyre's point of view is that Ianthe is associated with things like pure gold and sunbeams and glowing hair. In being associated with these things, like the sun, Ianthe not only tries to draw herself closer to Tamlin, who is often associated with sunlight, like in Thorns and Roses, but she also appears as the antithesis of night, or darkness, or Feyre, who is High Lady of the Night Court.
Quote, after she, Ianthe, been briefly introduced by Tamlin, she mostly cooed over Jurian, who had only scowled at her like some insect buzzing in his ear. This is giving me prologue flashbacks to Rhys describing all of the flies buzzing in his ear. I also think that this link is here between Rhys and Jurian as a reminder that Jurian's good. Like, Jurian's on his side. He's like Rhys. Just like Ianthe is linked to Hybern because, you know, those were all dead bodies that were surrounded by flies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the group return, Feyre complains about being sore from riding the horses. At the start of Mist and Fury, we talked about how the members of the Spring Court didn't need to ride horses and that it was mostly for show. So to continue to ride horses, even with the Hybern commanders in tow, is this a charade the Spring Court is doing? Is it a sign of weakness on the Hybern commander's part?
It's a sign of weakness because they can't winnow.
Which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
For them to be so powerful but can't winnow.
Yeah, I love it. Feyre starts to forget her game with Lucien, and I will argue is becoming friends for real with him. Quote, I gave Lucien a subtle pleading look, and he barely hid his smirk as he sauntered over to me. I only patted Lucien on the shoulder in thanks. Ever the courtier, he bowed back. It was hard sometimes to remember to hate him, to remember the game I was already playing. I think Feyre reconciles with Lucien first because it's easier than facing Tamlin's apology. I think Feyre seeing Lucien change and accepting that is the outlet of forgiveness that she needs, because that forgiveness can't be directed at Tamlin yet.
Yeah, because Feyre's petty.
Yeah, I get it. Feyre finds out the truth about Lucien and Ianthe, but before we get the full story, Feyre says her stomach twisted at the idea of Ianthe and Tamlin getting together. Quote, she insisted. Tamlin was... Things were bad, Feyre. I went in his stead, and I did my duty to the court. I went of my own free will, and we completed the rite. Please don't tell Elaine. The fact that he asks her not to tell Elaine breaks my heart. It's just so sad, because he didn't want it.
So that quote was from Lucien, and it is really sad. I mean, he doesn't know Elaine. Elaine doesn't know him, doesn't care, but it is cute but sad that he cares so much that she doesn't find out.
And even Feyre recognizes things got blurry there between consent and non-consent.
Yeah, and I wonder if in that act, in Lucien performing the rite during Calanmai because of his duty to and friendship with Tamlin, in doing so, I think irreparable damage was done to their friendship.
And I also personally, I don't think it's a blurred line. I think it's assault. And I think that it was done completely without his consent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I know Lucien's saying it was with consent, but like when you have your high lord who's going to let everything fall apart and you have to do it, like, that's not consenting.
That's not consenting. Feyre feels the weight of the jeweled knife Lucien gave her grow on her belt. If nothing else, I think this is signaling Feyre's sense of empathy for, and maybe even duty to, Lucien. And she's really starting to recognize that she has those feelings. Like you said, Jac, it's kind of her outlet for forgiveness. I think it's also important that we recognize it here because it impacts her later choices associated with Lucien. I think what really hits home for me is when Lucien acknowledges, quote, you're a better friend to me, Feyre, than I ever was to you. And if you think about all the times Feyre called Lucien her friend and he didn't act like her friend in Mist and Fury, like That must have hurt her soul to hear.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy is like he's saying it and finally admitting it at the time that she's being the worst friend to him.
Right.
Yeah. But it's so perfect. So perfect. We then go into Alice trying to fit Feyre into her old dresses. Feyre has thickened up, and we love to see it, to the point that Alice can't help but comment on it, and we start to see here that Alice is on to Feyre.
What I'm getting from this is that lies don't solve all problems or disguise all truths. And I think that's an important lesson Feyre is going to have to eventually accept from her time at the Spring Court, but she's not ready to.
When Feyre says she's already worn one gown 3 times already, Alice says that she used to never care about it before. But I'm willing to bet after months of being dressed by Rhys, she probably does care. That's probably the one honest thing she has said there.
That's true. Alice is using clothing as a weapon against Feyre in this moment. Alice pulls out the night court clothing Tamlin didn't find and tear up, and she uses that to interrogate Feyre. It's especially cruel, as Feyre exclaims, because these were the first clothes Feyre felt free and more like herself in. It's the turquoise night set.
I love that set, though. It's a great set.
We all do.
Yeah. Then we find out that Alice asked Moore to take Feyre. Quote, I never told him that, never told any of them. Let them think that you'd been abducted, but you clung to her and she was willing to slaughter all of us for what had happened. Again, people are letting Tamlin believe that Feyre was taken. This is a big enough point that Feyre should reflect on it, but does not. Another quote, they say you came back different, came back wrong. I never bothered to tell them. I think you came back right. Came back right at last. Is this Alice talking about Feyre when she came back from the Night Court or when she came back as Fae from human? I always debated the two. I think both can work and both have meaning.
I always assumed it was Feyre coming back Fae, because I think the chatter about Feyre coming back wrong would have happened in those months after Under the Mountain, before the wedding.
I also think it could have been coming back from the Night Court because people would assume that she's been infected from the Night Court. But if Alice was admitting, like, I think you came back right at last, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, but point. It can be either way. I like it. I like both interpretations.
I do too. What I learned from Alice's explanation is that Rhys's attitude toward Lesser Fae has become a tell, just like Feyre's health is a tell. No matter how many lies these two tell, sometimes the truth is inescapable, and only those with an open enough mind are able to see it. Unfortunately, Feyre isn't always one of those people.
No, she's not. Question. Alice helping Feyre. What does this mean? Is she against Tamlin, or is she just for the winning team?
I don't think it's specifically either one of those. I think maybe Alice is just really against Ianthe and the poison that has entered the Spring Court. Because Alice has always been grateful to Tamlin. Even if she hasn't respected him, she's been grateful that she's had a place there.
Yeah.
The dress she picks for Feyre is pure and clean, like Ianthe's robes. Feyre wonders if Alice has deciphered Feyre's plan to thwart Ianthe. And maybe, I think, just that is enough for Alice to side with Feyre. Because when Feyre says, quote, all I want is to settle back into life here to heal. And then she thinks, heal the land of the corruption and darkness spreading across it. In that moment, Feyre observes that Alice understands her meaning, and who doesn't want to take Ianthe down?
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone. So, now we go into the first breadcrumbs of the season. In the prologue, quote, I used my power until it was nothing but smoke in my veins, just like Rhys will at the end of the book when he dies.
Also in the prologue, quote, I'd always thought death would be some sort of peaceful homecoming, a sweet, sad lullaby to usher me into whatever waited afterward. I now wondered if the lullaby of death was not a lovely song, but the droning of flies, if flies and maggots were all death's handmaidens. It's so funny that Rhys's first imaginings of how death would be are actually more aligned with how he will die at the end of Wings and Ruin.
Yeah. Chapter 1, quote, my rage had become a living thing inside my chest, an echoing heartbeat that soothed me to sleep and stirred me to waking. Maybe an incarnation of the beast that Feyre will see in the Ouroboros? Maybe.
Remember? Also in Chapter 1, Ianthe, quote, still wore the pale hood and silver circlet set with its limpid blue stone. Like a siphon, the jewel in its center reminded me of Azriel and Cassian's siphons. She had never removed it. So for me, this is 2 breadcrumbs. First, a nice little breadcrumb for when Feyre impersonates Ianthe later in the novel, she uses Az's siphon to recreate the circlet. Also, we know that Ianthe is indeed dead because the Weaver wears Ianthe's circlet at the final battle.
In Chapter 2, quote, Jurian was mad, had gone mad long before the King of Hybern had resurrected him to lead the human queens down a path of ignorant submission. Another wrong assumption on Feyre's part.
She's got a lot of them.
Yeah.
Also in Chapter 2, Tamlin and Lucien did not seem to entirely mind that the King of Hybern possessed the cauldron. And that's another wrong assumption, Feyre, darling.
Finally, in Chapter 3, Lucien says to Feyre, whatever you're planning, it'll land us knee-deep in shit. He's not wrong.
He's not. Let's go back to the question we asked at the beginning of the episode. Is the jump from Mist and Fury to Wings and Ruin believable?
Yeah. I mean, it all is. We were talking about that a little bit at the beginning, and the emotion is believable, right? Because she was angry at the end of Mist and Fury, and she's angry at the beginning. It's the idea of vengeance that shifted so much. I think in order to say that it's believable, we have to see that Feyre was getting that little twistedness prior. So if you think back to how she killed the adder, the way that she needed to see the adder's eyes before she killed it, right? Like plummeted to the ground with him. That's starting to see the vengeance side of her come out. And it's almost like she lets it go too far here at the beginning of this. And that's where it all happens. But I really had to reflect on like where this vindictive, angry side of her, that evil, more evil side of her comes out. And you can see it in the Battle of Valaris.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I also think about Hybern in the end of Mist and Fury and how Rhys's worst nightmare has come true and Feyre's worst nightmare has come true. Rhys is powerless to help his friends. Feyre's sisters are harmed. And so it's not surprising that immediately after the Battle of Valaris, where we've seen Feyre's rage control her actions, for her then to have this ultimate failure, there's no other option other than for her rage to intensify.
She was trying so hard to be Rhysand. You know, like she finally becomes High Lady. And what does Rhysand do? He locks himself up with Amarantha. So here's Feyre doing the exact same thing. Like she gets to become High Lady. What does she do? She's going to do what Rhys did. But the difference is Rhys did it to protect his friends. And granted, Feyre left in order to protect her friends. But this whole bringing the court down from the inside, like, she didn't have to go that hard. And that's where she starts to miss the, like, yeah, Rhys wasn't like this, love, sorry.
No, and that's where her youth comes into play.
Completely. Her brain's not done developing yet.
It's not. She's only 20.
Yeah, like, 25 is when you're, like, start finally being a developed brain.
And even then, I would say you can't think rationally till your 30s.
You know what? Can we just push that up a little bit more, please? 40s? I need more time. Wait, before you hit pause, can you sing We're All in This Together?
We're all in this together. Da, 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 da.
That sounds better. I feel like that wasn't what you did the first time.
Okay.
Not because you didn't know it, but because I sang it wrong first.
Okay. Thank you.
I was going to find out how it sounds.
Play it. I was doing the first time I sang it earlier in the episode, I was doing the dance in my head. So I was like, we're all in this together.
Yeah. The second time you did it, I was like, yeah, that's correct. The first time it wasn't as good, but only again because I truly believed. I screwed up your like your lead-in.
No, that's all right.
After talking with some of our listeners, you guys gave a really great suggestion. We're going to read a review a week that you amazing listeners have left us and just kind of say thank you for all you've done and all you say to us.
We love to read our reviews because A, they make us feel good. B, they also really help boost the show and bring more awareness to the show. So thank you for all of you who leave us some written reviews on Apple Podcasts. This review came from Circle. I think that's how it's...
Circle.
Circle? I'm obsessed with this podcast and obsessed with these ladies. I feel like we're friends chatting about a series we all know and love. I've also picked up so many tips through the analysis done and incorporated it into my own writing. I can feel myself becoming a better writer and critical reader by listening to this podcast.
Oh my God, thank you.
The
feelings. This is literally our reactions to it because we haven't read this one before.
Yeah, this is brand new.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm so happy that that's how you feel because, I mean, we started this podcast to make ourselves better writers ourselves.
Yeah, so I'm glad that it's helping someone else become a better writer too. That's awesome.
And we are friends listening. That's how people say that it's like chatting with friends. We are your friends.
We are your friends. Be our friends, please.
Please.
Thank you. If you would like to hear your review read, go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a written review, and we would be happy to read it on the show.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll be exploring the chapters 4 through 7 of A Court of Wings and Ruin.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini episode.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to visit our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo. Also, follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk.
Bye.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.